host Michael Allison. And before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Today's guest is Miss Lisa Price. She's the founder of Carol's Daughter. Started in Brooklyn, New York back in 1993 inside of her kitchen. She turned that brand into a multi-million dollar brand. The brand was also featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, which gave it a boost in 2002. And in 2014, the brand was acquired by L'Oreal USA. Miss Lisa is also a phenomenal keynote speaker, which I had the opportunity to listen to her speak at the Small Business Leadership Conference. She's also an author, been featured in multiple high-profile media outlets and publications. She's also a mom and a wife. But through all of this success comes a bit of adversity in life and in business. And she's here to talk to us about her story of how she overcame these adversities. I can't wait to get into this conversation. I know you guys are too, so stay tuned. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me on the Overcoming Adversity podcast. It's an honor to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Overcoming adversity is something that everyone has to do, but we don't necessarily know how.
Most definitely, most definitely. Like as I was telling you, I had to come a good bit of adversities in my life. And after speaking to you and learning a bit about your story too as well, I know that you had to overcome so much and you had to build a brand starting back in Brooklyn, New York, which was just an idea that you started with, you and your mom, and you turned it into a phenomenal empire. So what I wanted to do is, as we get into this conversation, is what level of inspiration, motivation, and dedication created such a consistency for you to build a brand to where you have it at now today?
Well, I mean, given that the brand was started in 1993, 30 years ago, that commitment, drive, focus definitely shifts throughout the years because when you started, at least in my case, I didn't start it knowing that it would become what it became. So initially, it was a hobby. It was something that I enjoyed doing. It was, like people cook, people bake, people knit, they crochet, they sew, they bike ride, whatever that thing is that brings you joy, that you're passionate about. That's what it was initially. And my mother encouraged me to sell at a church flea market in May of 1993. And, she said, "Your body butters are really great. I think people would pay for them." And I remember thinking, "Really? Okay." And I did that flea market and I sold out. And someone walked up to me while I was at that flea market and handed me a flyer for a craft fair that was coming up in Brooklyn a week or two later. I did that, then I did another one and another one. And, it started organically that way. Initially, I thought, I worked in television and film production at the time. So I thought, well, I can do this when I'm not working. I could do this on the side. And then whenever my husband and I decide that we want to have children, maybe this could be how I contribute to our household income because television and film production jobs are very demanding, and they're not structured in a way where babysitters and nannies like work out well. You'd have to have a babysitter that's like, "Okay, so I need you on Sunday at 5 a.m. and I'll be back like maybe Monday morning around 10." So it would not work well. TV and film production is a lot of long hours, especially when you're lower on the totem pole.
Right.
So that was the initial impetus, and it shifted and changed as it grew. Today when I think about what moves me, what is my drive, it it is always providing quality products that people need and can use and gain benefit from, but it's also about representation. It's also about encouraging other entrepreneurs. So yeah, but it starts out initially with that passion and that desire to bring that thing that you've created to other people.
Wow, Lisa, that's such a phenomenal story to tell us how you had that drive as a youth. And as I think about that, I think about myself as a youth where I got into multiple different things, and I only wish that I had someone that was pushing me and gave me that words of encouragement as you did. So,
Mm,
because I think about that, I used to collect baseball cards, football cards, things like that as a kid. I got into arts. I was a phenomenal painter, drawer, and things like that. But there were so many different directions that I could go. But I think a lot of kids nowadays miss out on the point of having good mentors, good leaders, and good role models. And I see you as someone that's doing that. You know, when it comes to what you're doing, was there a pivotal moment when you said, I'm going to leave this industry and I'm going to go full fledged into Carol's daughter? What was that pivotal moment for you?
it's interesting because you would think that when you get to that place where you have to make that decision of giving up your job to pursue your business, that it would be, you wrestle with it, you struggle with it. And for me, I think because I did both for so long, I did my side hustle for so long
Right.
because I was nervous about letting go of the job, that by the time I let go of the job, it was because it made logical sense.
Wow.
And for me, I had been through credit card debt, going through bankruptcy, in my 20s. When I started Carol's Daughter, I had just turned 31. Yeah, 1993. Yeah, I had just turned 31 when I started the business. So I didn't want to repeat what I had done in my 20s financially. So I was much more cautious about how I spent what I spent it on. So giving up a paycheck, that did require a lot of thought. But by the time I actually did it, it was because it made sense logically. Again, I worked in television and film production. I had gotten a gig that was more normal in that space. But even with those more normal hours, if I had had a babysitter come and cover me in order for me to work outside, and then I would have to come home and work at home, I would probably spend more on the babysitter than I was actually bringing home.
Wow.
So it didn't make sense to do that. And it made more sense to be as frugal as we possibly could, eliminate a babysitter, and manage being a stay at home mom with the business, and ultimately, hopefully, contribute to household expenses, but at least keep the business paying for itself so that my husband's income could pay our bills. And it made sense in theory, it made sense on paper. So taking the leap of faith was less frightening because I could look at the numbers and say, okay, this makes sense. If I have a babysitter, there's no paycheck, it's just going to that person. So I did it, and thank God it worked out. Of course, we had different hiccups and things along the way that my husband and I had to deal with, but we met each challenge, and we're still here.
Lisa, that's a phenomenal explanation of the pivotal moment. And I think it's interesting and key for listeners to take away. And if you could expound a little bit on taking calculated risks, which is what you did, and the
Yes,
breakdown
yes.
of that, because you didn't just jump out there and say, "Nah, we're just gonna go out and just
No.
do this," right?
Yeah.
So if you can talk about the importance of just taking calculated risks as a business owner
Absolutely.
now, because you stepping into entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. I had the benefit, if you will, of the previous, bankruptcy in my 20s, personal bankruptcy, overspending, not making good choices. So I didn't want to do that again. And I still am like that today, where I really think about what I'm going to do. When I was building my business, people would say to my husband and I, like we were selling at an event, and I'll make up numbers. It cost $1,000 to have a table at this event for 3 days,
Hmm.
and it was in Atlanta. We figure out our costs. How much is it going to cost to ship the product there? $1,000 for the table, our plane tickets. What can we get with points? Oh, we can rent a car with points. And we go and we do the show. It's the two of us working. We don't
Hmm.
have somebody else there. So we minimize the overhead to make it work. Someone at that show says, "Oh, you need to come to this show. You'll make so much more money." But that show, the fee to get in is 4 times as high as the one
Wow.
that we're doing right now. So now the bar is really raised. We ultimately did do that show. Thank
Hmm.
God we broke even, but we never did that show again because it was too risky.
Mm.
Um, so when you're operating on under the premise of what I earn here has to go back into the business, it puts you in a position where you can't lose all the time because there's no cushion.
Right.
So when you're operating without investors, without a safety net, you make really smart choices, or at least you try to. Sometimes, even when you think you're making a smart choice, you just have a day where you didn't make the money that you needed to make, and it just happens. But you just try to minimize that risk as much as possible. Not every business allows for that. There are some businesses where you got to go hard or go home, but then you need investment. you know we pray, and we think positive thoughts, and we put good energy forward.
Right.
But faith without works, the work sometimes is the planning and the
Right.
calculations. Yeah.
Absolutely. The process. Lisa, you said something interesting to me. I thought it was. I don't really hear too much people say this, and I hear it because I did the same thing myself. But it sounded like you and your husband took your products, probably checked them in at the airport, and you took them to the show.
We didn't. I
Okay.
have I have done that before. Back in the day when you didn't have limitations on toiletries,
Hmm.
I was traveling to Sephora to
Okay.
train Sephora staff on the products,
Hmm.
and my sample kit was my carry-on bag, and
Ah.
I would bring all of the stuff on board the plane because I didn't want anything to break, and so I could take everything out and explain all of the products to them. You can't do that anymore because everything has to fit in a Ziploc bag. But no, when we did those shows, we definitely did ship the products there, because with the products that I make, and at that time, most things were in glass. Now
Mm.
we have more plastic than we do
Right.
glass. Everything was way too heavy. Yeah, it,
Right.
it would
Right.
have been impossible to take it to the airport. If we sold t-shirts and things like that, then you could do that just with extra luggage, but not this stuff.
Got you. Another thing that you said that I thought was super important was your husband, and it sounded like he was a catalyst to your support system.
Yes.
And knowing that he was there side by side with you, helping you build the brand, I think as entrepreneurs, we need a support system as we're doing this entrepreneur thing. Not everybody could do it by themselves, as some of us need a little bit of help along the way. Can you
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
talk a little bit about just having a support system in business, whether it's your husband or just building a team around you or anything like that as you're building a brand? Can you speak towards that?
Absolutely. There's an old African proverb that says it takes a village, right?
Right.
So there's nothing that we're doing alone or in a vacuum. And it's important to have support. As the founder of a brand or company, you bear the brunt of the vision, the creativity, the innovation, the ideas. Your team helps you translate that and execute those things.
Hmm.
Um, if if the people in your life that you live with, whether it's a parent, a sibling, a best friend, a spouse, um, they become a part of your business, even if they don't actively work in the
True.
business. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you really don't turn work off, you know?
No.
It's something that we all have to work on, obviously. Like when I first had the business in my home, I learned after years of that that I needed to close that door. So if
Hmm.
the office is over here and it's Sunday and I'm not supposed to be working, don't go in there. Don't look at the
Mm.
desk. Don't open up the computer. Don't sit down there. Those are things that you have to teach yourself. But when you're first becoming an entrepreneur, everything just spills over into everything. And your business is your life, and your life is your business. So whoever you live with, if they're not on board with that, that situation is going to get uncomfortable. You and your sister won't be living together anymore. You might be getting a divorce. You and your best friend, you know what? I can't be your roommate, um, because it does become a bit of a group effort. But the support is very important, not just for support, but also for expertise. Because how likely is it that the person who founds the business is going to have the idea, is going to know how to produce it, know how to do finances, know all of the legalities, understand regulations, be an HR expert for when you start hiring staff, know how to set up a website, have social media strategy. Like, none of us are going to have all of those skills, and
You're right.
all of those skills go into building a business.
Right.
So you definitely need support, and you need a team. And sometimes the team is a team of people that you pay. Sometimes it's a team of people that you contract to do things. And sometimes it's your good sis. You are great at finances. Can you help me with this Excel spreadsheet? Because it's a mess.
Most definitely. I love that. I had to get my family involved once we got started with our business, just to get it up and going. So I absolutely 100% agree with you. And you spoke so much to like all of the departments that you actually need to help a business going, whether it's at different phases in the business, but you do need these types of components in your business to make
Hmm.
your business grow. So Lisa, you grew up in Brooklyn, New York.
Yes.
Can you tell us what was it like for you growing up in Brooklyn, New York? And what was that environment like that led to your spirit of being an entrepreneur? Did anything motivate you to something that you saw in Brooklyn? Or was it growing up with your siblings and things like that that you actually now take as a business owner just coming from Brooklyn, New York?
Well, I did not grow up in an environment that encouraged entrepreneurship.
Mm.
I am a Black woman in America,
Mhm.
born in 1962, and my grandparents on my mother's side were from Trinidad. And on my father's side, his mother was from Jamaica and his dad was American. And these are hardworking people. You have a job, you have a steady job, preferably a job with the city, the state, or the government. A kind of job where you can't really get fired unless you walk in and try and punch somebody. Um, Good medical insurance, that was what was instilled. And then also going to college and maybe becoming a professional and not even needing that government job because you're going to be a lawyer or some, a journalist or something like that. um, so entrepreneurship wasn't something that we talked about, but I grew up my mom was the youngest of seven, and her siblings were very close to each other because when they came up in Brooklyn as kids, they were immigrants in
Mm,
this neighborhood. But this neighborhood at that time was an immigrant neighborhood, but it didn't mean that it was just immigrants from the Caribbean. It was the Caribbean, it was Irish, it was Italian, but we were all not American.
right.
So they grew up with their parents insulating them and surrounding them with other people like them and helping them feel like they were in a protected environment in this place that was foreign.
Right.
Um, they then did the same thing with their children. So I grew up with my cousins as if my cousins were like siblings. We were super close, always together, always at my grandmother's house. My grandmother's house was like drop off after school. You get your homework done, somebody comes and picks you up later. There's always food on the stove for like 12 people. Um, if someone moved, you didn't hire a moving company because the moving company was the family and everybody had their jobs on what to do that day. So it was this idea of community and shared work. Um, when I was a kid, Costco didn't exist, but my aunts and my mother would find sales in different places. And if one person was in the supermarket shopping and she knew somebody else could use those things and something was on sale, she bought 12 of them because she's going to give it to somebody else later. So that community economics, all of that is how I built my business because that's what I grew up with. So I didn't grow up with someone telling me that I could be an entrepreneur. But when I decided to be an entrepreneur, I knew how to save, I knew how to uh, barter, engage people to do things. I remember people helping me and they would get product in exchange because I didn't have money at first.
Mhm.
So, I'll make you hair butter if you if you help me label these 200 bottles. Uh, but that's what I learned from them growing up in Brooklyn. But the interesting thing that I discovered, and I mentioned this in the speech that you listened to, my uncle Ron was an artist on multiple levels. So he was a jazz musician, he was an amazing photographer, and then he was a painter and a graphic artist.
Wow. Talented.
And he did some of those things in an entrepreneurial way, but then he also had later in life, he had a job where his job was with this small record label that specialized in jazz musicians. So through his, years of playing with different musicians, he had connections to people. He would bring them to the label, help produce their work, and then shoot photos and design the album covers. But he didn't refer to himself, at least in my presence, as an entrepreneur. But as I grew up and looked back on him and his life, I realized that I had an example of a person who took their passion and they were able to make money out of it. And then when he retired and moved to Georgia, he became the manager of a bowling alley. And he was a passionate and avid bowler. So he got to take that passion, but then got to have a little job, someplace to go every day because he was getting bored being at home. And then he brought his graphics work into it, creating flyers and online things. So there was an example sitting there, but I didn't realize that that's what he was to me until I was much older. So it will be interesting as more of us become entrepreneurs for our descendants to see more examples within their family where it's not just one aunt or one uncle. There's multiple people. It will help the ecosystem of entrepreneurs, because when you see it, you can be it.
Absolutely. Man, I love the story. And growing up around so many siblings and so many friends and so many cousins all in one neighborhood, I think it really showed you the drive of your family, because I think a lot of the Caribbean heritage is based off lots of hard work. And
Hmm.
I think you've seen that growing up. But what's,
Absolutely.
but what's crazy is you had the blueprint from your uncle right there in front of you, man. Right there in front of you.
I didn't even realize it, and also my nana, my mother's mother, she used to make a hair grease.
Mhm.
Do you know that I was in business for probably 3 years, and one of my family members said, "Oh my God, this is like Nana, like you're making hair grease." And I was like, "She did make hair grease." Oh my God. Because it was like her curry chicken or her butter cake, like her chana. It didn't it it wasn't a business. It's just she made it for us. She
Right.
made it for her friends on the block. She probably sold some jars to people here and there just to make her own money, but it didn't click. I was in business literally 3 years, and one of my cousins said that, and I was like, "Whoa, yeah."
So Lisa, you chose to get into this beauty industry, and as we know it, the industry is dominated by tons of mainstream brands. And for you to say, I'm a step and go full force into this business and into this industry, I would like to know, did you face any challenges, any uphill battles as you were trying to carve out your own lane and become a staple in the industry?
Well, first, I'll say the beauty industry used to be dominated by
Mm,
a lot of mainstream brands.
mhm.
Not so much today. It's a
Right,
much more diverse ecosystem. Even though there are the major players, it is a much more diverse ecosystem today. Um, when I started this, I didn't think of it as a beauty brand. I was making products in my kitchen to help people feel better about themselves, to make their lives easier. Um, I've always loved fragrance, and I started out with fragrances, and fragrance would transport me from the situation that I was currently in. If I was feeling shy about something, I could put on a fragrance that made me feel less afraid.
wow.
And I just wanted to do the same thing for other people. The more that I grew, the more I began to see who I was, and what I had the potential to be. And thankfully, my journey was such that as I got there, then it's like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. All right, let's take that next step. Oh, wow. Okay, now we're doing this. Okay, all right. I think I can handle this. And you just keep taking the steps. Um, because there isn't a blueprint. Why would I think of myself as a beauty brand when beauty brands to me at the time were Revlon, um, Mary Kay?
Right,
I didn't look like that. I didn't
right.
have commercials on television. I didn't have ads in magazines. There was no internet. There was no Instagram. You couldn't go on Instagram and see an independent person making whipped shea butter in her kitchen and say, "Oh, that's what I want to do." So I didn't think of myself in those terms, but thankfully was able to continue and move forward and move forward. And when I used to speak years ago, I would refer to myself as the accidental entrepreneur. It wasn't something that I intended to do, but I got there. And now that I'm here, I want to let other people know that you don't always have to have the roadmap completely figured out. you can still walk on the path and get to where you're going. Of course, it's a little easier if you can plan it and look ahead and turn on the GPS. But sometimes, we don't have all of those resources, but it doesn't mean that we can't move forward and do what we're here to do.
100%. I often talk about that, and that's how I kind of plan things out for myself. Though I call it 3Ds, as in like decision, directions, and destination. And I always try to like make sure everything aligned to my destination.
Mhm.
So I've been waiting to ask you this, and I wanted to understand, why did you call your company Carol's Daughter? And then, if you can you tell me some of your fondest memories of your mom? Because I think that's such a phenomenal acknowledgement of your mom to name the brand after your mom.
Well, when I needed to come up with a name, and it's interesting because I came up with the name for the brand before it was actually a brand. So I
Mm,
had the name before the flea market in 1993, because
uh-huh.
before that flea market, I did this as a hobby. So I would make gifts and things for people. So on the one hand, you had somebody saying, "Oh, you smell really good. What is that you're wearing?" "Oh, that stuff that Carol's daughter makes." Meaning literally Carol, who we work with at work, the stuff her daughter makes, right?
Mhm.
Then I I had an opportunity to go to a salon. Um, I worked in television and film production. The actress Erica Alexander was on the show that I was working on at the time, and I would make hair oil for her sometimes. Not anything that I was charging her for. It was my hobby, and
Right.
and so she said, "I took this to my salon and they love it. You should go talk to them. They want to meet with you." And I went and met with the salon. The salon was called Knaps, and I met with the owner of the salon. And back in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, this was where you went to get the high top fade cuts. And when people decided they weren't going to relax anymore, the early non-relaxing people, and they would
Mhm.
just get it all shaved down, or they could get their locks started. Um, and it was in Brooklyn. I went and met with that person and realized, if they're going to carry my oils, the company, like the bottle has to have a name on it. And
Right.
I didn't have a name, because I would just make things and give somebody a bottle without a label. So I worked with a boss that, when he needed to name a project, he would make a list of things that the project was going to be about,
Right.
and the goals of the project. And from that list, he would brainstorm a name. So I made a list of things that I was, and a list of things I wanted to become.
Mm.
And on my list of things that I was Carol's daughter. I was also Robert's daughter, and Gordon's girlfriend, Hank's secretary, etc. Um, but when I said Carol's daughter, it was kind of like, hmm, just that little, ooh, you know. And I went with it because of that. Because I used to do that. I would trust that little intuition, that little feeling. And what was good about that was, as an entrepreneur, we know that thing comes up a lot of times
Yes.
when somebody is saying, "Come on, you got to make this investment in this new blah blah blah," and something goes, $3,000 for a printer. I don't know, right? And they're
Right.
there with all the logic and everything that makes sense, and then you're like, I'm a wait, I'm a wait. And then you find out later that they discontinued that printer for whatever, and now the new model is so much better and it's cheaper. And then you go, see, you know. So that thing becomes something that you end up trusting as you move through your business. So for me, naming the company Carol's Daughter was that first moment of, ooh, yeah, I think that's the thing. What it ended up becoming was this amazing way of giving my mother her flowers while she
Mm.
was still here. It became a joke between the two of us. She would say, she would call me up if if I did an event or something. How did it go today? Oh, it was good. It was good. She said, yeah. She said, you make enough money for me to sue you yet for using my name? And
Oh
I was
man.
like, no, no, mom, you can't take me to court yet. She's like, okay, okay, I'll wait, I'll wait. Um, when I got to go on the Oprah Winfrey Show, um, she called me and she said, okay, I'm gonna tell you something. You keep doing TV, okay? And I said, why? What are you talking about? She said, girl, I went to the hip center today. I didn't have to wait in line for my blood test. I didn't have to wait to see my doctor. Everybody coming, Miss Carol, come here, come here. So she said, she was like, you keep doing that. I like this. I like this special treatment. Um, she was such an amazing person. Glass half full, never half empty.
Mm.
Always had faith. No matter what adversity she was facing, she would always find the silver lining in the cloud. Things could be worse. She taught me how to pause, take a breath, because if you pause and take a breath, then you can actually think. And this is without self-help books and just what she knew from what she learned from her parents and her sisters. And well, no, there were some self-help books because she and her best girlfriend loved Iyanla Van Zant back in the day.
Mm.
And she kept one of Iyanla's books next to her bed, and she said prayers from Iyanla's book every night. But I learned so much from her. And what we have done within the company is, when we talk about the name of the company being Carol's Daughter, all of us who are here in this world are someone's son or daughter,
Right.
someone's child. And we are a product of the environment in which we were born and raised. And no matter what our race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, we're all someone's child. And it's the one thing that we all have in common. So I come into the world as Carol's daughter, and you come into the world as, whether you choose your mom or your dad, to identify. That's how you come into this world, and you're born into the world, and then you make yourself into who you're going to be. And
Right.
Carol's Daughter was born in Brooklyn and made with love.
So Lisa, if your mom was to see what you've built and what you've done, what do you think she would say to you now?
Honestly, I think she would be amazed at how big it got. She passed away in 2003. So she wasn't here for investment
Mhm.
and Sephora and Macy's. If she had gone downtown Brooklyn to the Macy's on Fulton Street and saw my products on the shelf, she would have sobbed. Um, I think it would have been just remarkable for her to see that. I love that I got to share the Oprah moment with her. I'm very
Mhm.
grateful that that happened in 2002, because I was on Oprah in June of 2002 and mom was gone February, on Valentine's Day 2003.
Wow.
And I'm grateful that we had that to share, because we both had such a love for the show and for Oprah herself, and for what she represented in the world at that time, and what she represented to us in the world at that time. And she would be just as amazed and thrilled to see who Oprah is now. Because back then in 2002,
Hmm.
we looked at her and when I say we, I mean in our community, we
Right.
looked at her as, oh my God. And where she is now, like I don't even know if you can just call her a person. You know, she's an energy, an empire, a force of nature. Y- You know, who knew that that's where it would go? So I think my mother would be very proud, but also, wow, look at how different things are. Look at what happened. Look at what you've done. Wow.
Most definitely, man. I agree with you. I think Oprah is on the next level. I remember watching one of the show when she was like, "You get one, you get one, you get one, you get one." I remember that went viral. But I
Mm-hmm.
also recall during COVID, she did something phenomenal for just people that was shut in, and she put on a whole production for everyone that was inside, and just kind of like uplifted everybody. So I agree with you, and she's like just a complete different energy when she
Yeah.
does that. Yes.
Yeah.
So speaking of representation, you chose to get into this business as well, and what I think was pretty phenomenal by you is that there are not too many products being made for African American when it comes to our hair,
Mm-hmm.
and you chose to do that. You also did something else too. You also chose to buy Spike Lee's vacant building back in your hometown. Can you talk a little bit about just representation for the African American woman or just the person that's using hair products, and then to create a business back in your hometown and become a staple there too as well?
Well, first, let me say, I didn't buy Spike Lee's vacant building. However, the first store that I had outside of my home
Hmm.
had been the location for his 40 acres and a mule store. So his building was actually down the street from that store,
Hmm.
but that store was where he would sell merchandise from his films, jackets and shirts and things from Do the Right Thing, and um, all of the iconic films that he made in the 80s and 90s. Again, back then you didn't have websites, you couldn't go and purchase things like that. So you would only have that type of merchandise if you happened to be on the crew for those films. So uh, that store was his, and then it was empty for a while, and then I rented the same space, and
Hmm.
it became mine. And what was phenomenal about it is he and his team were forward thinking with how the store was constructed, the phone wires that were in there, the construction of the basement to house the inventory. All of that stuff benefited my business
Hmm.
in being able to have multiple phone lines, so that when people called the customer service line, they wouldn't get a busy signal, they'd get connected to
Wow.
somebody. So
Genius.
not it wasn't a direct thing. It's not as if he did it for me,
Right.
but I got to step into that legacy. And then, because I'm a person who believes in energy, me stepping into the space of someone that was doing first and doing iconic things, um, thinking outside of the box. That store is a store that if we saw it today, it wouldn't be so, wow, look at what's here. But back then, it was a
Yes.
very, oh my God, you have to go to 40 acres. You have to go. The stuff they have there is remarkable. I got to step into that energy and that legacy, and that always meant the world to me. Um, with regard to what I've done for Black women and their hair, I would love to say that, oh, I sat in my kitchen and I said, I'm going to revolutionize the world. No, I didn't. I started making body products at first. When I was selling my body butters at the different craft fairs and things, Black women were coming up to the table asking for things for their hair. And when I said that I didn't have hair care, they walked away from the table before they even
Mm.
tried the body butters. And so I said to my husband, one of the days when we were packing up, I said, I think I need to like learn how to make some hair care products because they're not even trying the body butters. So I started researching herbs and oils. I started to make things. I made a hair oil first that I used on myself. My husband used it. I used it. I noticed a difference in my hair. I felt like my hair was growing more. Not that I had measured it or anything, but it seemed to be fuller. And then that experimentation went into, well, let me try making a pomade. And oh, when I was younger, my grandmother used to use this cream that I loved. And you can't find these things. Let me make a cream. And I used it on myself. I started to discover that I could actually control my hair because before I made products, I I was kind of like if my hair wasn't the way that it is now, like braided or something, I didn't know what it would look like. So there were days when I had good hair days, and then there were days that I had bad hair days, and I didn't know how to always have a good hair day. It was just kind of like, what you gonna do today? You gonna be nice to me? You know, because I didn't know what to do for the frizz or the curls um, and making these things, and I remember I was using my body milk on my body, and I just said, what if you put lotion in your hair? Can you put lotion? Why not? Why can't you put, let me just, you know, and I put the lotion in my hair. And then I realized, oh, I don't just have to have a body milk, I can have a hair milk. So that's how it happened. It was a discovery for me. I was learning what I could do for my hair. I'm sharing it with other family members. And people will sometimes ask me, how did you know to make products for Black women, or like what was your impetus for doing that? And honestly, I was making products for my family.
Wow.
And at that time, I think it would be different today because today we have so much more diversity. There's lots more interracial marriages today than there used to be. But back in the early 90s when I began, if you asked a white person to bring a family album to the office, and you ask a Black person to bring a family album to the office, when you open up the white person's family album, you'll probably see a lot of consistency, unless maybe it's Italians who married Polish, and then you
Right,
have
right.
mixtures of hair colors and stuff, right?
Mhm.
But there's a consistency of textures. There's differences in heights, eye color, but hair, there's kind of a majority thing going on.
Right.
But if you look at a Black person's family album, it's all over the place.
Wow.
In one household, you can have a kid who's got curly hair that doesn't really get too coiled or tangled. You could have another kid whose hair is super super thick, and mom is like, oh my god, where did this hair come from? You have your great grandfather's hair. And then you have a redhead that just came out of nowhere. you know uh, and it is because, unfortunately, our gene pool is very jumbled up, as a result of slavery. There's a lot of stuff going on. So my thought process was, if I'm making products for Black people and their hair, I'm making them for everybody,
Right,
because
right.
we have every texture, and some Black women have four different hair textures on one head. So
Right.
that was how I thought about it, because at that time it was not smart, um, marketable. I couldn't say this is for Black hair
Right.
and like be successful. So this is for hair, this is for moisturization, this is for your scalp, this is for frizziness, this is for this is for that. Today we can talk about who we are, and
Mm,
it can be from a place of pride, and it doesn't push people away from you, because back then even Black people didn't want to identify with "this is made for Black people," because we translated that into, well, it must not really be good. We're so much better today.
so
We've
much.
educated ourselves. Social media and those platforms have allowed so much more conversation, so many different brands. We have the Fenties of the world, the Pat McGraths of the world, so many other hair brands, Shea Moisture, Jane Carter, Mael, Main Choice, Camille Rose, like just Pattern, Taraji P. Henson, like so many people having this conversation and sharing their stories and viewpoints. But back then, that it might have been what you were thinking and where you were
Yes.
going and what you intended to do, but it wasn't the thing that you could take into your marketing.
Yes. I think back then, our minds were being filtered with different information, and then to hear you say it now, how we're embracing it, I think that's the best part of the outcome from the story. As you're saying that, you're so right. When you look at the two separate photo albums, I thought about that when I thought about my family, and I knew that subconsciously, but it was not at the forefront of my mind as I thought about it. My grandfather's from Cuba; he has soft, curly hair. My other
Hmm.
grandfather's from England, and he has soft, curly hair, and they're very fair skinned. Then I have a sister, she's Indian, and she has long, like, coolie hair, right?
Hmm.
And then, my mom and dad is from Jamaica, and our hair is much more coarse and thicker. So inside of
Hmm.
our household, there's different products all of us use while growing up, but I never really
Right.
thought about it until you just shared that.
And unfortunately, um, the way things were in the past, some of us grew up with the comparison that one person's hair was good and the other person's hair was
Mm,
bad.
true.
I'm very, very grateful that in my family we didn't have that. It still existed in other places. So there were times when I would be around Black girls at school, and the Black girls at school didn't like me because I thought that I was this and that, because, oh, yeah, she got that good hair. She thinks she's all that. And honestly, I was like, what is good hair? Because I didn't hear that at home. I didn't know what they were talking about. But then you're not necessarily accepted by the white kids because you still a nigga. So, you know, it's and I'm grateful that those conversations are getting better. We're still not there, but they
Mhm.
are so much better. So much better.
Yes, the conversation has changed and the dynamics have changed. And I love the fact now, like you spoke about all these people that created all these individual brands or companies and things like that. And you could
Mhm.
tell just there's people just more embracing themselves now. I see a lot more women with much more natural hair instead of wearing the weave or the extensions and all these different things and stuff like that. So I truly, truly
Well,
love
I
seeing it
mean,
actually.
the weave and the extensions are fine. That's part of natural hair,
Right.
because now that we're not relaxing our hair,
Hmm.
um, the hair itself is not as compromised, because relaxers are hard on hair. So
Right.
there's very few hair types that can really withstand what relaxers do to the hair. So having strength in your hair and good scalp health allows you to wear weaves and extensions without damaging what you have growing underneath. So that
Hmm.
flexibility for us is very important. We used to do this to ourselves, where if someone had a weave, she hid it, she pretended that that's not what she did, because we would talk about her. Who are you trying to be? What are you trying to do? You trying to act like whatever. And we didn't let her just live. Today, we
Mm,
don't do that to each other. So a woman could come to work on Tuesday and have hair that hits her ears and is curly and cute. And she could come to work on Wednesday with 32 inches down her back, and next week she could have braids, because it's like it's an accessory now, and it's what she wants to do and how she feels, and it's not about what somebody else thinks or what someone else has decided. That the most important thing about the natural hair movement is that we gave ourselves choice and options. We weren't relegated to a style, because if I change my style, I will lose my job. If I change my style, I will lose my partner. If
Wow.
I change my
That's so true.
style, I won't get promoted. Those barriers are being removed, so we have choice. You can't even look at in the past, in my opinion, I wouldn't look at a relaxer in the past as a beauty item, because what about it was about beauty? It was necessity. We were not
Exactly.
allowed to have our hair be in its natural state if we wanted to get a good job, keep that job, get a good man, keep that man. You know, that that psychography is gone, and it will never ever come back, and never should come back. And beauty is about having choices and options. So you could weave, you could extensions, you could braid, you could afro, you could lock, you could do it all, but you just have to have healthy hair to start.
1000%. I love that. I love that. I love that. Lisa, you are a pioneer as I'm listening to what you're saying. And I also think that you're a pioneer with how you started this brand. You started this brand with no internet, no social media, none
Mm-hmm.
of those outlets. And you
Mm-hmm.
built it to where it's at now. Can you just tell us the importance of what you did to navigate through all of these different trenches just to be where you're at now today? Because I think that's phenomenal to speak to entrepreneurs, just like encourage them and let them know that it can be done now that we have all these different outlets and you did it without it.
I'm grateful for my process being my process, because the person that I was, I think it would have been more challenging for me to have built in public, if you will.
Hmm.
Because people who build today on social media, they are using the social media as a tool, and that tool is either one to promote and gain support and gain a following, thus gain customers, thus earn income, thus fuel the machine, right?
All right.
Or they're using it as crowdsourcing for information, because they can't pay for marketing research and all of these things. So they go to their followers and say, I'm thinking about making pineapple hair smoothie. What do you guys think? You know, and if they get enough response, they feel a comfort level in experimentation, and then letting them know, hey, it's going
Definitely.
to launch. Those were things that I couldn't do back then. But no matter where you are, if you're in 1993 with no internet, no social media, or you're in 2023 where you have all the bells and whistles, the foundations of business stay the same. Your goals are still the same. You need to generate income in order to pay for your business. In order to generate income, you have to market your services or your products. In order to market your services or your products, you have to tell stories. Um, the deficit that I see is when you didn't have social media and you didn't have money for commercials and magazine ads, you had to storytell. And storytelling is a very important part of marketing, and it's very important to Black consumers in particular, because our stories have not been properly told for
Right.
centuries. So
Right.
when someone is in the public eye, whether it's public that it's, you know, a film like Disney's The Little Mermaid, or if it's somebody who's starting a brand and they put up a post on Instagram, when we hear our stories being told and being told well, and we feel that representation, we're pulled to it. And I think some of the social media doesn't necessarily cultivate the storytelling. It does from the creative side of things, from visuals, but not words. And so the deficit becomes the writing and the words and the captions. And I think you have to have a bit of both, because your storyboard starts with words and starts with the message and then evolves into the visuals. So hopefully that will course correct itself, and we'll have more people that are better at the writing part of it. And that's something that I'm grateful for with my journey. I started out with words because I couldn't afford color photography and printing and taking professional pictures and things like that. So if I wrote about mimosa hair honey, I had to describe it to you and explain the texture. So when I have to write today, um, it's not such an arduous task, because there was so much that I had to write in the past, and I words are really important. And with everything being so digital, the art of writing can get lost, and I don't want that to happen.
Definitely. I think telling your story sets you apart from others. Speaking of stories, Lisa, I
Hmm.
know throughout your journey with building this brand, you've helped so many women. Has there been anyone that has came up to you? And I'm asking that because I recalled when we was at the conference, there were two young ladies that spoke up and how you inspired them throughout the years. But has there been anyone that has shared a story with you or a testimonial of how you've changed your life with creating the product and building your brand?
You're asking me that question, and I'm sitting here and thinking to myself, how blessed am I that I can't even pinpoint it to one special moment, you know, because there's so many.
Wow.
Um, and part of that, I suppose, is being in business for 30 years. You just accumulate the stories, but there are certain moments that just sort of like stand out, and one of them just happened 2 weekends ago. I
Mhm.
was in Boston at the NAACP convention, and it was the first time that I was invited to speak on a panel about mental health, which was like, wow, like I'm going to the NAACP convention and I'm not talking about entrepreneurship, and I'm not talking about exit strategies and what it means to sell, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to talk about mental health. Yay. And then what made it even better, there were two Black men on the panel,
Wow.
both, I don't know their exact ages, but I'm pretty sure I could be their moms or at least their auntie. Maybe one of them was 40 something and I would have been like a teen mom or something, but the other one I'm pretty sure was 30 something. Um, and one of them said to me, "Your How I Built This podcast is one of my favorites. And when I started my philanthropic effort around health and wellness, I listened to yours over and over for inspiration." And this guy was a former football player, nothing to do with the beauty industry. And I just, when he said that, I said to him, "Oh, thank you for sharing." But inside I was just like, wow, like,
Yeah.
wow. And that podcast, that guy has a very popular podcast. When I did it, I'm older, right? So
Mhm.
all of these young people in this entrepreneurial ecosystem, Black and white, they're listening to podcasts because that was the thing. I was reading books, I was older, I didn't do what they do. So I didn't know how popular his podcast was. And then I did it, and literally every week for 2 years, not figuratively, literally every week for 2 years, somebody would say, "Oh my God, you're how I built this podcast. Life changing. Oh my God, it was amazing." Or I'd have a DM or a comment on an Instagram post, "Just listen to your podcast." And it was remarkable to me how far that went. And this is, I can't even remember what year I did it, but it's definitely more than a decade, absolutely more than a decade. And to hear it from this young brother who was a professional football player was just like, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
But you've
Pinch
definitely
myself.
made an impact on me, Lisa. I as I listen to your story and hear some of the struggles that you had to go through to build this brand, and I was thinking the tenacity, the drive, the love, the passion, the support, all of the philanthropic things that you've done. I was like, I was truly inspired by you, which is why I wanted to have you on here. So I'm going to give you your flowers as we speak here and just want to tell you congratulations for all the things that you've done. I truly admire your drive and your passion, and I really, really appreciate you being on here with me.
Thank you. Thank you. When you mention adversities, before this ends, I just wanted to add that a lot of times people, when they interview you for, they want to talk about your business and what you've done, a popular question can be, what obstacles have you overcome? Give us an example of a really stressful situation, and how did you tackle it and how did you overcome it? And what I learned, because when I used to answer those questions in the earlier days, I would have a specific example of, oh, this time that I tried to go to a bank and do blah, 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 or I was trying to negotiate a deal with this store and, what they wanted from me and I didn't have it yet, or, whatever. And then the more that I stayed in business, I began to learn that those things that I looked at as adversities and obstacles and struggles and difficulties were just business. They really weren't
Mm,
adversities and obstacles and struggles. It's business day in and day out. But when you don't have a blueprint for business and you don't understand what it takes,
right.
it feels like, oh, I'm so stupid. I should have known and I didn't know. And then when you layer into that being a woman and being Black in America, we're supposed to have everything figured out. We're not just doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for everybody that came before us and everybody who's coming after us. So we're carrying around this weight that is massive, and we're desperately afraid of screwing up because we don't get second chances. We don't get to come back and we don't get a do-over. You messed up, sorry, next. And no one talks about that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
No one gives voice to that and puts it in its proper place. So what I began to learn was my biggest obstacle was me.
Mm,
How I reacted to things, how I responded to things, how I dealt with things. And I had to recognize I can't make people spend money. I can't go into their pockets and take the credit card out and swipe it and then hand it back. I can only do the best that I can do. And if they shop, they shop. If they don't, they don't.
right.
And I can't view it as a personal attack or failure if we don't have great sales one day. We just didn't have great sales that day, and it'll be different on another day. And when I began to shift that perspective, it was easier for me to do bigger things. When I began to shift the perspective to taking care of myself because I always put myself last. I
Wow.
didn't think about going to the doctor. Um, did I get my nails done? And that can sound like, really, get your nails done? But if you're out in the world representing a beauty brand and people have ideas of what beauty brands are and what people should look like, it would be like if I showed up here for your podcast and I didn't do my hair. I'm a hair care person. Why didn't she do her hair? Like, what? I don't
Mhm.
understand what's wrong. And then no one can hear what you're saying because they're just focused on, she didn't comb her hair. It doesn't she sell hair care? Why is she frizzy? You know, they, so I shifted to scheduling certain things. Like I have to schedule my manicure because when I go on television to sell, you can see in this podcast, I'm moving my hands when I'm
Right.
talking. So if I'm on HSN and I'm holding products and I'm talking and I'm doing this into the camera, if my hands don't look right, I'm pulling your attention away from the thing that I'm
Right.
doing and you're looking at my hand. So it's not about spoiling myself and going and getting this manicure, it's presentation and
Right.
preparedness. But I had to schedule it because I wouldn't just do it because I viewed it as, well, isn't this selfish? I'm going to get a manicure? Why? Um, those are the things that we have to learn, whether we're entrepreneurs or not, that we have to learn about ourselves and get out of our own way. Our fears, our insecurities, our previous failures, all of those things come up in what we're trying to do in life. And they tell us that we can't do better and be greater. And when we start to tackle those things, more doors open. And then that lends itself to having conversations about mental health and why it was so great to be at that convention 2 weeks ago and talk about mental health and us. Because as Black people, we think of mental health as, what's wrong with you? Why you got to go talk to
True.
somebody? What are you doing? See, that's because when you were a kid, you were lazy. And I told you that, right? Like
You're right.
right?
You're right.
Okay. And but we'll go get our blood pressure checked, some of us. We'll go do all the physical things, but we don't do a mental health check. And then if we do get to therapy, we're typically walking into therapy on the left, like there's about that much left and everything's going to fall apart, or everything blew up and fell apart and now we got to go to therapy so we could get out of jail. And so you're walking in with this emergency situation and all you're thinking about is, well, I got to get to the other side so I can stop. What am I doing? I'm doing this for what, 6 weeks, and then I'm going to be good. And it's your whole life. Your mental health is your whole life. And so now, I said that I would look at it and say, my biggest obstacle is me. Now, the lesson that I've learned after 30 years of being in this business is the beauty of the duality. That over here, I can say, I'm so fulfilled. I love the fact that I started this brand 30 years ago. I love all of the things that I've done. I'm so proud of myself. And at the same time, I can feel like, God, this is so hard after 30 years, constantly reinventing yourself. Jeez, when am I going to stop? Right? Like both of those
Right.
things can exist at the exact same time. And we have to give space for that duality because life teaches us it's one or the other. And it really teaches Black people it's one or the other. Like,
Right.
bruh, you got to be lucky that you got this. Why the hell you complaining about that? We don't give ourselves that space to do that. And I think that is so critical, and it really becomes critical when you're an entrepreneur because you have so much less support. When you're building a career in a company, at least you can go to HR, you can go get education, certification, courses, talk to your supervisor. Like there's other supports. It's not perfect, but there's other supports
Right.
within that. But when you're flying solo and you are the one charting the ship for everyone else, if you don't take care of you, you can't get anything done.
Wow, man, you were hitting home when you were speaking that because I'm thinking about some of the things when it comes to personal growth, your personal health, and then tying that into the professional aspects of being an entrepreneur. And
Mhm.
I thought about for myself too when it came to some things around mental health. As I share with you, I struggled with some things as a youth, then struggled as a veteran once I got out, and I really had to go out and seek that and get the professional help that I needed for myself as I wanted to become a better father, better husband, better businessman, and just
Mhm.
be a better person out here in society. So I love the fact how you speak towards the importance of mental health. I carried around so much emotion, so many things that I bottled in, and
Mhm.
I did not know how to release all those things. As you're sharing that mental health is so important, and that's
Right.
the care and the treatment that I had to go through to get help for myself.
Yeah, yeah. It is, it's critical, and maybe my next chapter, somehow I'll figure out how to become an advocate in that space, because I think it is so so important, and I've been able to see firsthand through things that I've gone through with family members. There's a serious lack of care and resources for Black and Brown people in general, but it impacts us more because we tend to be at the lower end of the income spectrum and so forth. But
Correct.
then even when you have the resources to pay for services, I've been blessed to be able to pay for family members to be in therapy. Finding a therapist that looks like you, not so easy.
Right.
And not that they always have to look like you to be helpful, not at all, because I've definitely had therapists that don't look like me that have been very, very helpful. But it helps when you're talking about people who are more vulnerable. When someone is in a crisis and they are struggling with just being able to talk about what has happened to them, and they have to overcome the hurdle of, oh, I'm a girl and this thing has happened to me, and I have to speak to this male about what
Right.
happened to me. How is he going to understand? Like, it's already hard for you to talk about it, but now
Correct.
you feel like you have to translate for this other person. And then layer on top of that that maybe the male is white and you're Latina, and something that happened to you is woven into your culture, which isn't his culture. And how is he going to understand? So representation is so important, and we don't have currently, I know it's being worked on, we don't have enough therapists that are diverse out there in the ecosystem to treat the people that need it. um, and a lot of this bubbled up during COVID and after COVID, because so many people needed to talk to somebody, and issues that people weren't dealing with suddenly went, handle me, so prayerfully that's going to shift, but it's going to take time for people to go to school and graduate and get certified and be out there in the world. So yeah, it we have to approach it from so many different angles, pushing people to go get the therapy, and then also pushing more bodies into the work stream, so that there's just more diversity out there and someone can open up to someone that they feel will understand them.
You're 100% correct. Knowing that there's a process, right? So for people that's going to go into that profession, there's a process when it comes to getting certified, and to have people that are represented that looks like us is another challenge too as well, because there's lots of stigma that's tied to that profession when you even look at it or think about it. And then
Yeah.
being the patient yourself, kind of like what you're speaking to, it takes a certain level of courage to be transparent, to be vulnerable, and share your story with someone else, and knowing that you could develop some level of trust with this person that you're about to
Hmm.
give them your entire life or your entire story.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch on something that I know some of our listeners have kids. And I thought about your story as you started your business at a younger age. So for the mom and dad that's listening to this podcast and they have a kid right now that's listening and they want to go back to their kid and tell their kid about your story and about this podcast, what are some words of encouragement that you could lend to that mom or dad if they have a kid right now that's doing a craft, got a hobby, have an idea, or something that they're working on? What could you tell that mom and dad?
Well, I think when people are encouraging their children, the most important thing to do is to expose them to options that are available to them, not necessarily specifically, oh, look at this, you can be like that, or look at this, you can do what they did, but just exposing them to the different opportunities that are out there. I remember a conversation that I had with my mom, and my mom didn't necessarily know anybody who did these things, but I remember her saying to me, when you go to school, don't just think about, um, you can become a lawyer, or you could become a writer. There's so many things. She was like, what if you were a biology specialist, like a marine biologist or something? You love the beach, you love the ocean. What if you studied fish? And I remember thinking, study fish? Like, what is she talking about? But what it did as a kid was just let me know that I didn't have to be limited to something.
Mm,
Um, and then I think when we encourage our kids' hobbies and passions, even if they flip around to things, if you just say, okay, let's give that a try. Okay, well, you didn't like so and so. Do you think you're really going to like this? Instead of criticizing, shutting the door, like allowing them to explore. I think that's important. And then when you can pinpoint that there's something that they keep going back to, that's when you can start to look for examples for them to see. So I know a child, she's 19 now, but at the age of 2, she gravitated to opera. And because it was so odd, right? Her parents really leaned into it because they were like, what 2-year-old likes opera?
wow.
Like, she would try to, how kids try to mimic what they're hearing? She would try to mimic it. And then
Yeah.
if somebody turned it off, she's no, 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 more, more. So they leaned into it, and it really became a passion for her, that she loved exploring, and she shared it with other people. She's not an opera singer. That's not what she does.
Mhm.
Uh, but it was something that she was allowed to um, indulge. And then she got to share it with other people. And it ended up becoming a work of representation for her. And she started the Kids Art and Opera Posse in Georgia, where she lives. And they became members of the Metropolitan Opera House in New York.
That's
And
what's up.
she organized trips to the Met twice a year,
Mhm,
where they would be hosted by the Met board.
mhm.
And I've gotten to be part of some of those trips to go to the opera, and it just opened up this whole experience for these 8, 9, and 10-year-olds going to the Met twice a year with their parents. That wouldn't have happened. So I think it's listening to our kids and showing them options. There's a poem by Khalil Gibran where he says, your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but they are not from you. And though they are with you, they belong not to you. And we try to make our kids be who we were. And they have their own path. They have their own work to do, and we're just supposed to guide them and support them. And if we do that, and if we show them what's out there, then we stand back and watch what are they going to do? What are they going to create?
Wow, that was beautifully said. I'm gonna take that away from you.
Yeah, Khalil Gibran, The Prophet is the name of the book, and that particular poem I think is called Of Children or For Children, something like that. Yeah, I remember listening to that before I became a parent,
Mhm.
and then living it like, oh yeah, I get this poem now.
So speaking of doors opening up, I have two sisters, and I saw them as kids watch The Little Mermaid, and you had the opportunity to collaborate with The Little Mermaid. Can you talk about that opportunity for yourself, for your brand, and as I saw it, representation as well?
Okay, Carol's daughter this year got the opportunity to be an official partner with Disney's The Little Mermaid. And I was actually just talking about this yesterday. And I, as Carol's daughter, I did have the opportunity to work with Disney when they did Princess and the Frog.
Mhm.
And Princess Tiana was the first ever Black princess. And that was phenomenal, amazing, life-changing, spirit altering, like all the things. This time the partnership was deeper and more impactful because we were the level of partner where you end up at the premiere and your name and logo is on the wall next to
Wow.
AT&T and HSN and Disney, and there's so many levels to why it was wonderful. It's who gets to do that twice in their lifetime.
Yes.
Not me, but I did get to do it twice in my lifetime. Um, there was the fact that my youngest daughter, watched Chloe and Hallie on YouTube when she was like 7. And Chloe and Hallie were these cute little girls with their locks singing covers in their home. And my youngest introduced me to Chloe and Hallie. I was, hearing her playing something one day and I'm like, who is that? Who is that singing? And then I got to meet Chloe and Hallie at a YouTube Black event many years ago, and they did a recording for my daughter that I could bring home to her. And to see them become who they became together, and then who they're becoming separately, and to be a part of Hallie being a Black mermaid was like, what? you know? Um, and I remember when the conversation started over an email about us being a part of this, and you have that moment where you go, okay, I can't even get excited about this because it might not happen. We might not have the budget. This is a really big deal, but oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Right. And so there's the one side of you that says, I'm gonna pray on this so hard because I want this so much. And there's the other part that says, okay, we got to do all the business stuff because we can't do anything that's stupid. And this is going to be really expensive. And let's be smart about how we do it. And thank God those two roads came
They're
together
lying.
and we did what we were supposed to do, what we needed to do, and what we love to do. And I say we because it's not just me that becomes a partner with that film. I might be the person who's on the video, who's talking about it, who's promoting it, but it was my team. And all of us were passionate about it. And we were so passionate that throughout the process to get there, because this is like an 18-month process, it doesn't happen fast.
Mhm. Wow.
The baton kept getting passed to different people because people left and took other jobs, and like,
Mm.
all right, we working on this Disney thing. I'm passing this to you. You got this, right? Got it. And that's how intense it was for all of us. A lot of the people I work with are a lot younger than me. So like your sisters, they watched Ariel. They
Yes.
wanted to be a mermaid. They didn't know anybody with long red hair, but hey, I'm gonna be a mermaid. And now to see a mermaid that looks like them, that their daughter can look at, that looks like them, it's so many levels of joy and empowerment and representation and feeling seen. And there's a part of the film, and I won't say who says it to who and when, because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. But there's a part of the film where someone looks at someone and says, "You shouldn't have to lose your voice just to be heard." And the power of that statement, for me, I was in the theater and went, you know, it was like, okay, I heard it, God, thanks. I'm out. Like somebody said, let's write this for Lisa Price. You shouldn't have to lose your voice to be heard. Because as Black people, I feel like the rest of the world and us, we celebrate our ability to overcome. We're so strong. We can overcome anything. We came through slavery. We came through civil rights, blah, 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 blah. But nobody takes the time to acknowledge you shouldn't have had to go through that.
True.
It's great that you didn't let it define you. It's a part of who you are, but it's not what you are. I may be in it, but I am not of it. All of that is fantastic. But you also have to acknowledge it shouldn't have been that way in the first place.
100%.
And I'm sorry you had to go through that, but thank God you're here. And that's what that moment is for me. I shouldn't have to be proud that I got to be a part of the second Black princess, because there should have been more of them from jump. But okay. There weren't, but I'm happy I'm here, and I feel like moments like that, we're going to have another moment coming up with the color purple at Christmas. Those
I'm looking
moments.
forward to that.
Oh, child, I have like 3 purple outfits picked out. I'm trying to figure out which one. I am so ready. But it's that way of, like I think about what you said about your story, and I'm sorry, I said I needed to wrap up, and here I am rambling. But what you said about your story, and even the title of this, overcoming adversity. Yes, we can overcome the adversity, but part of overcoming the adversity is accepting and acknowledging that the adversity shouldn't have happened in the first place.
Right.
And even if what happens to someone can say is a result of their direct action, if you dig deeper, you'll probably find out that direct action that caused whatever to happen really came from something unresolved from back here somewhere.
Right.
And that's part of that mental health story, that when we look at those situations, like I've had the benefit of, in my therapy, going back and analyzing a conversation that I overheard my dad having with someone that I didn't think about for a lot, or so I thought,
Right.
until I started to peel back the layers and understood the impact of 9-year-old me
Mm-hmm.
hearing a conversation that not only I shouldn't have heard, I heard it by accident. I wasn't eavesdropping. I just happened to walk in when it was occurring and no one noticed that I was standing there. But also a conversation that shouldn't have happened, period. And then when you don't have anyone to talk to about that, that 9-year-old gets stuck in that moment of what the hell? And nobody goes back to the 9-year-old to say, all right, listen, this is what happened. You didn't have anything to do with that.
All right.
You were there. I'm sorry you were there, but you didn't have anything to do with that. And I am so sorry that you overheard what you never should have heard. We end up having to do it for ourselves in therapy because we don't necessarily get to go talk about it. And when we can do that, then we can really heal. So I'm all for overcoming. I'm all for representation, but at the same time that we are pushing representation, we also have to say it should have never been that way in the first place.
Correct. Correct. So, Lisa, as we get ready to wrap up here, another opportunity came your way, and Carol's daughter was acquired by L'Oreal,
Mhm.
and it came with some backlash. I wanted to ask you, how did that affect you, if it did at all, or anything? And then I thought about it for myself. If I had that opportunity, how would I celebrate as well? So, if you
Mm.
could you elaborate on that for us a little bit?
We were acquired by L'Oreal in 2014, and what I'm going to add this now. If you edit it later, it's totally fine. But when you sent your questions to me, you phrased it as partnering with L'Oreal, which is something that people will advise you to say
Hmm.
because it sounds softer. And the idea is that it gives the illusion to the consumer who's reading about what's happened that um, you're still actively involved. Um, it is a partnership in the spirit of how we came together, but it's also an acquisition.
Right.
And I think it's important to not soften the language because I think people need to understand that acquisitions can occur that have positive outcomes. And
Absolutely.
again, in business in general, just in business, not black business, not white business, just business. Well, most of it is white, but just business. There are acquisitions, and some of those acquisitions are fantastic, and some of them are horrific. And that's just what happens.
Right.
Most of them are good, but there are some that are not good. And as black people, unfortunately, our narrative has been somebody came in and they took what we built. They just picked it up and smashed it to pieces and said, ha, build it again, and walked away, knowing that we don't have the infrastructure to build it again because it took us forever to build that little piece of something that was over there that you just stepped on.
Hmm.
We're accustomed to people coming in to partner with us and then they swindle us. Other people have that experience too, but ours seems to be every story sounds like that. So we don't have positive stories of acquisition. We haven't built companies that other companies want to buy. That it's happened, but it hasn't happened a lot. And it happens kind of quiet here and there. That is changing. So did I get backlash? Yes. Do I still get backlash? Yes. Do people call me a sellout today? Yes. Have I learned to live with it? Yes. You talk, do what you want. I know who I am. I know what I built. I know how hard I worked. I know that I did exactly what I was supposed to do, given the business structure that I was in. I am not a sellout. I am not justifying or explaining myself to anyone any longer. What I can do is be an example of this was my story. What the founder of Shea Moisture does is, hey, here's the example of my story. My family and I built Shea Moisture. We sold it for a whole bunch of money to Unilever. We started up a fund for Black businesses, and I bought back Essence. Ha! How you like me now? The founder of Mayel, she sold just recently this year to Procter and Gamble. She's starting her own entrepreneurial situation. She and her husband are building wealth for their daughters, like, and each acquisition has its own nuances and tweaks, and
Right.
things get better, and they get better because there's more of us in the ecosystem. So some of us had to be the sacrificial lamb. All right, I went first. I got beat up. They threw the sticks, they threw the rocks. They talked about me. They still talk about me. It's okay. I got a lot of cocoa butter. I could take care of the scars. I'll keep it moving. And then the others that follow, they see what I went through. Maybe they do theirs a little bit different. Maybe they change something. They get hits too, but then they keep it moving because we all know what we're here to do,
Right.
and we just keep doing it. So the more that it happens, the less frightened we'll be of it. And and people will say, well, why not just sell to a Black person? Like, I remember somebody said Oprah should have bought her company. Well, Oprah's in media. Like, Oprah's magazines and television and films, and she's got a school and Broadway, but the last I checked, she wasn't in the beauty industry.
Right.
So why would she buy it? But maybe somebody that graduates from Oprah's Academy in South Africa will build a beauty empire that will be able to acquire a beauty brand one day. But we got to get there. And the way that we're going to get there is building businesses and selling businesses, and then building businesses and selling businesses, because we have to build the generational wealth to be able to sit at that table. People don't realize how much it takes to sit at some of those tables. I'm at one table, but there's other rooms I can't even walk in.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's business, and
Yes.
people just
But
misunderstand.
unfortunately for us, business hasn't been exposed to us, given to us, allowed for us to develop. So we don't understand its full breadth.
Correct.
But that is changing, and it's
Correct.
changing in a big way.
Lisa, thank you so much for joining me. As we get ready to close out here, if you could leave our audience with some words of wisdom, some life lessons that you've learned on your journey. It's been a phenomenal journey, remarkable journey as you become a pioneer in my eyes and a mogul in my eyes as well. What are some life lessons, some advice that you could leave with our audience that they could use as some takeaways?
This sounds so sappy, but honestly, I'm hearing um, words from the song Home from The Wiz. Believe in yourself right from the start. Believe in the magic that's inside your heart. Believe all these things just like I told you to. Believe in yourself. It's what it boils down to. Believe in yourself. Believe in what you're doing, about the thing that you're passionate, and everything will come from that. Because if you are on a mission, if someone puts you here to do a certain job, and you follow that passion, that purpose, that drive, there'll be ups and downs and twists and turns, and there'll be adversities, but ultimately you're on a path, and you're going to keep traveling on that path. And I'm so grateful that I listened to that intuition and I believed in myself, because my business took me places I never thought I could go. And I don't mean destinations like a country or a city or something. I mean places like, I didn't think I could do this. I was too shy. Like, why would somebody want to ask me questions? Why would somebody want to interview me? What am I going to talk about? I don't have anything to talk about. I didn't do anything special. I'd be terrified to do something like this, but I learned how to do it because I believed in myself, and I believed in the project that I was working on, that was built on a passion that I had for something, that grew into something that began to employ me and employ my husband, and then employed other people, and then more people, and then people invested in it, and then somebody bought it. And I can look back now on literally hundreds of people that have worked for me. Hundreds. Like, that's like, whew. So yeah, believe in yourself. believe in yourself.
Well said. Miss Lisa Price, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Until next time, guys. Peace. We love you.
Can't complain at all. Couple dollars in my pocket, no income and go. Been working on my body, getting healthier. Thank God for clarity.